6 games this year. They're 5-1 with him. 34% usage. Just 7% turnovers.
Yeah.
And let me put this question to you actually first. Again, somebody asked it on a podcast, and I can't remember who it was, but it got my thinking going. One, do you think the Kings would have won Game 7 last year, the Curry 50 ball, if Fox didn't break his finger and kind of lose a step? Not a step, but not make shots because of it at the end of that series? Or do you think it's just Curry's going for 50, you're kind of screwed?
I lean towards Curry goes for 50. You're just kind of screwed, but maybe it's a little tighter, and maybe you just have a better chance of flipping that on its head, obviously, if Fox is right. Because so much of their success last year was Fox and him making shots and him being this amazing guy, and it's not exactly like the Warriors had great answers for what he is capable of last year.
Yeah, they lost by 20, but 5 of 19, and I believe he broke it before the Game 6 that they lost when they were up 3-2. So maybe that game should be thrown in here too. But he was 5 of 19 from the field, 5 turnovers, 6 assists. It was on his shooting hand. I just think that's one step of it. And then you start to wonder, well, could they have played the Lakers a little closer? I think so. I don't know. It is a kind of interesting inflection point that would affect a lot of how we view this team, and it has to do with their best player being himself. And the other part of this that I've been waiting to talk about is this guy's handle, I think, is maybe the part of his game that doesn't get talked about, and that goes to the turnovers.
Yeah.
Because I think it just gets overlooked with how fast every team plays now. But the ability to create space and navigate, help, and get to your spots when you're going 300 miles an hour, like, we can't just accept that that's reasonable. That a guy playing downhill at the speed of light as often as he does can just only turn the ball over on 7% of possessions and, shoot great from the field on a night in, night out basis and basically never make mistakes. This is the second year in a row he's on pace to shoot better than 50% from the field. Like, you're talking about an elite offensive engine, like somebody who legitimately, no matter whether it's the regular season or playoffs, is going to make an amazing possession out of every single time his team is trying to score the ball. I think he's just talked about as kind of like a show pony a little bit. Like, oh, that's cool. De'Aaron Fox, like, that guy's fast. It's like, no. He's incredible at a lot of different things, and he deserves to be talked about that way.
And look, they're 3-0 since he comes back, as we've said. The on-off splits for him this year just remain absolutely outrageous. They're obviously going to probably come back to earth a little bit, but they're just absolutely insane with him on the floor this year. I mean, they're 20 points better overall in 221 minutes when he's on the floor, according to Clean the Glass. That is an insanely elite number. Their offense is 15.9 points per 100 better with him on the floor this year. That's 9 points better than last year when he was incredible, and I think we're introduced to him in this way. I think you're dead right, Brendon. There's time to talk. It is time to talk about him in this way. I mean, the 43 against the Spurs, I think he had Cleveland in real hell, particularly when they didn't have a core to at least throw a warm body at him.
Even that, right? The fact that these teams have reacted so quickly over the course of like 2 seasons, basically, to, I mean, not even. It was happening last year, to the point where it's like, well, you need to have a forward on this guy.
You need to have like a strong point of attack guy on him at all times.
But not like
a small
Chris
guy.
Paul, or even peak Chris Paul. I'm not talking about Chris Paul right now. I'm saying like you need an Isaac Okoro. That's crazy.
You need size.
How many guards require that adjustment from their opponent in the regular season?
The best guards in the league require that, is the answer to that question. It is the best bigger guard you could think of because he does have the size, he does have the speed. And Brendon, this is like absolutely a situation where I think he might have I think you're right that he is underrated to some degree. I think he certainly is this. It's probably somewhat because, his breakout year was year 7 of his career. Like, it came a little bit later than we're maybe used to. He was in a weird organization for a long time. But these are his prime years, and he looks awesome. He looks composed. He looks like he's elevated. And he comes back, and you could just tell the energy that put into the team. You could tell he comes back, And it's like, okay, it's time. We're gonna all of the weirdness of the time he was out, the Rockets loss, just the way they were playing, the guard struggles they were having. He comes back, Herter plays, looks like he has a pulse again, and the Kings are back. And there's no real drop off in a way that we might have. You could have made the argument there was based on some of the struggles we saw. But this team just feels like it's here, ready to rock, and Fox in particular he's just at the head of that. He is the one leading the charge of them absolutely cooking.
Two questions on Sabonis for you to close us out, and I promise I won't go too long. But Fox first, to close that out. The big thing you had to wonder coming off last year was the mid-range shooting legit? That's the leap that he took. That's the thing that he did last year that he didn't do before, at least statistically, where his shots were coming from and where they were going in. He shot 51% last season from mid after never being higher than 46, and he shot 53% on floaters after never shooting higher than 46 on those. Small sample, of course. He's only played 6 games this year, but I have no reason to believe that's going away. He's at 64% on floaters, which is in the 100th percentile so far. It's not going to stay that high, but that's elite.
That's absurd. And
he's at 59% for mid-range overall this year. Only 17 of those are non-floaters, so it's mostly being driven by that floaters, and that's also in the 100th percentile. If he has that, and he doesn't have to get to the rim every time, and I think the handle and the passing and the control is at a level that it's never been before, he's always gotten to the free throw line. Like that's how it happens. And if he can keep those shooting numbers from those spots on the court up, and he's only made half of his shots at the basket so far this year, which is uncharacteristic for him. That's going to go up. He's an elite finisher. It's on trajectory to take another step from last year when he broke out in a huge way and was a legit all-star contender who didn't make the team. The guy who did make the team, Domantas Sabonis. 2 questions on him. There's a debate happening now because people are paying a lot of attention to Houston between Şengün and Sabonis. I feel like every time there's a Şengün highlight, Kings fans just pour it on and go like, well, our guy's been doing that for 2 years. Like, pay attention. Şengün's younger, so I think that part of the hype around him is there's projection involved.
Yes.
But how far apart do you think they are? Just as kind of a game to play.
If I'm trying to win a game right now, and I'm in a playoff series, I think I'm just going to go Sabonis just in the sense of I know exactly what I'm getting, and there's just a little less volatility. But I think what we're seeing with Şengün, with the high usage again, higher than he's ever been at, a turnover percentage this year that is lower than Sabonis has really ever been at, and some defensive instincts that I think been really impressive. I think you're getting somewhere where that's a closer conversation than Kings fans might want to be at. Now we need to see it, and I think certainly there's you have to get into the coaching with the Yokas in there that I think has helped Şengün, and I think their personnel is better equipped to support a lackluster defensive center, like not a naturally elite defensive center when you have guys like Dylan Brooks and everything like that.
Yeah.
And Fred VanVleet at the point of attack. I think there is something there that is really helping Şengün. But I think it's definitely a closer question than I would have thought coming into the year.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I think first, Sabonis is exactly the type of player that I think you fall in love with if he's on your team and you watch him 82 nights a year. In particular because he just plays so damn hard. Mm-hmm. And he's just so tough physically and just is going to be your guy, giving everything to win games for you as a fan base every night. Like that, that's why these debates get so heated and stuff. I think Sabonis, to your point, in terms of the roster context, like he's a guy who can play fast in a way that I'm not sure a lot of other similar players can or would be as successful doing. I think that can get overlooked, like we think of, okay, when they settle into a half court, then it's Sabonis time, but it's like, well, not really. He's going to hit ahead. He's going to grab and go. And he's as big of a ingredient in their fast break attack as anything. I don't know if a player like Şengün could play that way, so it is stylistically different. I think the place that I just land is those 2 inches that Şengün somehow pulled out of his ass this summer, that goes a long way. You know what I mean? If you're telling me Domantas Sabonis was 6'11", I'd feel a little different. But he's not. And so when he plays Anthony Davis like he did in the game we both watched this week, it's like, well, yeah, he got one block on AD. He's going to box out like crazy. He's going to be just as strong as Davis, really, I mean, at the end of the day. But AD has 2 inches on him. And
yeah,
that's only going to get you so far. Like, it is what it is at a certain point.
To just be a Kings fan for a second, I guess.
I mean, we are now.
I did see a stat. Yeah, that's true. But they're 6-0 against the AD Lakers with Sabonis in the starting lineup. So, like, there is, like, you can't. That's
AD was not great in that game. It was like it became a whole national talking point. So, it is exactly what you're saying. I mean, they've dominated them, but I'm just using him as an example.
Yeah, and look, that feels like quarterback wins, where it's like, is this a real stat? I don't think so. Like, I don't think those are like real things you can use to quantify something. But
it's like, are they losing because AD can't, outplay Sabonis, or are they losing because their offense can't keep up to the Kings? It's like probably the second thing, But
yes, it's not.
That's the thing, is like Sabonis makes it work. Sabonis is a winning player. I'll save my other question for a later date because it's something that I don't think is fair to hit on right now. But I think it just comes down to me as like, I'm going to pick the taller player more often than not because defensively that just goes such a long way. I mean, it's the same thing we were talking about with Vic and Chet when I threw that question at you. It's like, well, I'm going to pick the 7'3", 7'4" guy at the end of the day if they're similar. I'm going to pick the younger, more physically gifted dude, and it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that part of it, and I think the projection thing is a good part of this. Like, we just kind of know what Sabonis is. We know what his limits are. We know what his strengths are. We have a very clear picture of him as a player. I think when you have younger guys, and I think this is the case at all positions and all levels and all different kinds of things, you can project however you want. You could project a guy in a certain way because he's so young. You can just say, well, he's young and he can figure it out, and you see flashes. You see this, I think, with I don't think this isn't even a shot. I think particularly when you have a fan base that gets really high on a certain young player in their organization that they're standing for, that's just like a thing. That's a very natural thing that happens, that they can just be like, oh, I understand this very niche part of his game, but I can advocate for it, and I see it projecting, even if you're maybe overstating it. So I think that's a very natural part of analyzing younger guys. You can just latch on to a certain part of their game that they're really good at. I mean, I've done this with Okoro, like in my own backyard. It's like I see, you watch him enough, and you kind of are just like, oh, like there's things he does. There's things you can that when you then you blow out the big picture, and it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't as important as I thought. And you also just don't understand them fully yet. But you get to a point where, like, I mean, by the end of this year into next year, we are going to have a much clearer picture, I think, of what Sengun is in some ways, right? Like, I think this is the year 3 is, I think, really where that picture gets clearer. Even though he's still 21, I still think you start to kind of understand once you've had a couple years of service time, these pictures where
especially
Sabonis,
if you're trying to win.
Yeah. Right, and Sabonis is on his 3rd team, and like we've seen him in the playoffs. Like, we kind of just understand what he is and what he isn't, and I think that makes checking your priors, that makes kind of an analyzing things a little simpler. That's the way I would put it.
Yeah, it's a fun thought.
I think exercise. But I think for Fox, I think just to kind of end this with, I think that's the other thing with Fox too. It's like, you can appreciate what he is doing and the levels he's at right now, I think, a little bit easier because we've seen him for 7-8 years now. Like, we have a track record with him, and there's people that'll have a relationship with him back to Kentucky, right? Like, you have a very clear picture of what he is, where it's, and in some ways that makes it harder to be like quantify, to like kind of adjust yourself to how much they've improved because you're used to a certain thing. But at the same time, you also can look at it and be like, oh, this guy has really improved in a big way, and it's noticeable because it's a leap from where he was at and what I thought he was after like year 5 of his career. Like, this is an ongoing thing where you do need to check yourself, you do need to figure stuff out, and I just kind of understand that the picture is always kind of moving, even if it's clear as guys. You get more data, you get more film, you spend more time watching a guy.